Megan, let's just jump right into this here because on a name like Lululemon, we kind of all know the general positive reasons why this stock has done so well. We know the brand is popular. We know that consumers are willing to spend a little bit more, and we know that it's navigated the pandemic a little bit better than other companies. So, what is something that gets investors excited to keep, maybe looking for this stock to move higher, or what is something potentially that concerns you at LikeFolio that maybe they're running out of steam?
Yeah, so whenever we look at Lululemon, we're listening in for mentions of consumers who are shopping at Lululemon, whether they're going to a store or whether they're ordering it online and just having it shipped to their home. And one thing that we really keyed in on, especially over this holiday season, is this big shift of consumers ordering digitally. I don't think this is news to anyone. I think this is just how it is. And what we see is that Lululemon is executing really well in this DTC universe. And so we know that last quarter, Lululemon did really well with direct to consumer. I think it comprised more than 40% of their revenue. And what you see here on this chart, these are just those digital mentions. And you see those mentions are pacing up almost 50% year over year in the last month. So this is an acceleration even from the success that we saw last quarter. And not only just that, but Lululemon came out and said that Thanksgiving, I think Black Friday is one of the highest days for digital purchases that they've recorded. And we saw another huge spike on December 17th, which this is right before the Christmas holidays, right when you would need to order in order to get this in time for a gift. And so I think that that's just one of the good components that you mentioned, Alex. The one thing that Lululemon is doing really well is shifting to this direct to consumer, and consumers are taking advantage at an increasing rate, and we're seeing that continue even through the new year.
Megan, work with me here because I have a question to ask you about Lululemon's holiday shopping. And that is, I see your data on the 49%, and I understand how important that is. Why? Because I was one of those people that had to stand in line to get into a Lululemon, not because the store was overrun with people, but because of social distancing. They had to put only a small amount of people in a store at a time. So the question is the numbers, the 49% year over year number, enough to keep this stock at where it is now because of, and do you see any drop off? Did you see any mention in social media about lines and people getting frustrated having to wait in line to get in a winter in the Midwest? Was there any mention of that in any of the data?
Whenever we look at specifically in-store mentions, we have those pacing down about 30% year over year. And so I think that, last quarter we had them pacing down about 23% year over year. And I think Lululemon came out and said that the in-store purchases or in-store revenue was down about 17% year over year. So we do see continued weakness in store, but we see this rapid acceleration digitally. And so for whatever reason, whether it's just sheer convenience or whether it's because they don't want to stand in line, like you mentioned. I know personally I stood in line in a Lululemon, but I also ordered items online. So I think that just that versatility, the fact that consumers have an option, is really good for Lululemon moving forward. Another interesting thing we're watching that Jenny kind of touched on is this Mirror acquisition and this working out from home, and we're starting to see Lululemon get some crossover effect in that sense. I think that the Mirror purchase intent mentions, while a relatively low volume, were up about 25% year over year in the last quarter. So I think that that's another potential driver long term if investors want to look at potential future growth. That's something that I think that Lululemon is just kind of scratching the tip of the iceberg there. But so far, just in the immediate term, it is good to see that Lulu is giving consumers the option to order things and get them shipped home, and consumers are still having a positive experience. I think Lululemon happiness mentions are around 72% positive, and that's about 7 points higher than Nike, which is still, another best of breed company. So I think that this is, that's why Lululemon is valued so much, is because, consumers are happy and they're increasingly purchasing where they want to purchase the product.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, Megan, but I think it's all important. So I want to start with the mirror side of stories. I think
Yeah.
it was a very interesting acquisition for Lululemon because it not only is offensive in the way that they're kind of stepping into a new marketplace, trying to monetize a customer base in a different way, but it also in some ways was defensive as yoga studios obviously impacted by the social distancing guidelines. Things were primarily taking place outdoors here in Chicago. Well, with weather, that's not really taking place. So if one of the huge customer bases is kind of athleisure around workout, and there's things kind of inhibiting some of that working out from taking place, finding a way to create that activity and also monetize that activity, I think was a very powerful step and one that we'll see how it unfolds for Lulu in terms of the execution. As for the happiness, I think this is the real story. When it comes to a Lululemon, you talked about its premium and happiness that it has versus Nike, which is in many ways probably its primary competitor for what Lulu wants to ultimately become. Nike's kind of already that. So, Megan, my question is from a kind of a I guess quality perception. We always hear about how Lulu is so high quality and how much the customer likes the product. That obviously is a huge portion of its happiness, I'm sure. Has that remained solid? Has it come down at all as the company has scaled out and gotten bigger? Or has that been a pretty stable number? As that's probably going to be the key piece if it wants to maintain itself as a premium price point going forward, particularly versus something like Nike.
Yeah, I think that that's a really good point. Lulu does have comparatively some of the highest happiness when we look at its scale from a retail perspective. As I mentioned, Nike is a leader in its own industry. And so the fact that Lulu is beating out Nike in that consumer happiness, that is a positive point. Lulu happiness was dinged a little bit, especially if you look over the summer as they made the shift to digital. I think that there might have been a little bit of execution frustration from consumers at first, but now, we see that happiness pretty stable. We see that pretty strong. And so that will be a key factor to watch moving forward as they continue to kind of execute this strategy. And I think that, one interesting piece to watch is to see long-term how this mirror acquisition does impact happiness. If this is something that Lulu kind of has an ecosystem now, we talk about ecosystems in a lot of names, whether we're talking about Square or we're talking about Apple and things of that nature. And I don't think we've ever talked about an ecosystem when it comes to Lululemon. And so it's interesting to see if consumers will kind of, get further into this Lululemon world, if that happiness will continue to stay strong. But so far things are looking really good for Lululemon, especially after a strong holiday season. I think their quarter ends at the end of January, so we'll definitely be watching to see how this plays out at the end of this quarter.